Welcome to Preps Plus Extra, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel's online high school sports show, where each week we'll talk about some of the top issues involving high school sports of the day. How you doing? I'm Mark Stewart, prep editor of the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Joining me as always, JR Radcliffe, sports editor of Now Newspapers. How you doing?
I'm doing great. By the time we're talking again next week, we're going to know what the playoff brackets look like. I'm excited about that.
Yes, we are fast approaching what to me is one of my favorite times of the year. Yeah. High school football is equivalent of Selection Sunday. Most teams know they're in. Where they're going, we'll find out. One team that definitely knows they're in and is closing in on a share of the conference title in the North Shore is Whitefish Bay. They just came off a big victory over Homestead last week. Let's hear what Coach Jim Tietjen and senior Jackson Weber had to say about the victory.
Our first is always to win the next game. The second one is to qualify for the playoffs. Third one is to be the North Shore Conference champion. Next one is to go into the playoffs and continue to win. Those are our goals, and these kids are just checking them off as we move. Nicolet's a fine football team. You know, they played Homestead tough. There's some games out there. So we got our work cut out for us, no question.
We'll come in tomorrow, watch this film, and then move on to Nicolet after that. You know, we have a job to do. We got to do our job Monday through Friday and just keep getting it done, keep working hard, and do what we need to do to get things done. So.
Whitefish Bay, like we said earlier, is closing in on a share of the North Shore Conference title. But beyond that, playoffs are fast approaching, as we noted. It looks like they're going to be in Division II this year. What are your thoughts about Whitefish Bay and their prospects for the big prize?
Well, it's interesting. We were talking a little bit off camera about whether or not they would get in the same regional grouping of 8 with Brookfield East, because we've talked about them. They could be the Greater Metro champs by this time next week, and then both teams have a really good, a good claim to a number 1 seed. And it's a little different this year. In past years, it's been seeded out objectively by the WIAA, where they assign the top 4 seeds based on a number of predetermined factors, based on conference record and a few other things, things like points scored in the first half sometimes come into play. They try to break it down very objectively. This year it's different. You got all the 8 coaches in each region. They're going to get together. They're going to seed it out 1 through 8 instead of just 1 through 4. It's going to be a much truer seeding process, and so it's going to be really unique and different compared to what we've seen in past years. Whitefish Bay and Brookfield East, they are going to go in there. It's not going to be about who technically has the better conference record. It's going to be who's the better team, and I think right there you're going to have 2 coaches who are going to have strong cases to make. Right,
and it's going to bring in the dynamic that we've seen in from basketball coaches and really the coaches in every other sport. So from that perspective, the seeding process it's interesting, but it's what everyone else is doing.
It's not radical.
Right. As far as Whitefish Bay goes, I think down the road what seems to always trip up Whitefish Bay, is, are they healthy? Mm-hmm. It seems like every year going into the playoffs, Coach Tietjen has someone who's banged up a little bit. So I think that's going to be the key question, whether they can get through the Nicolet game, which is the game, with all due respect to the Knights.
They should win.
Mm-hmm. And do they get out healthy? And, and if they're healthy, they're definitely a threat. So, but, as we noted, selection, the NCAA has Selection Sunday. I guess we have, we won't call it Selection Saturday.
Weekend, more or less.
Yeah, Selection Weekend is what we have here. For football, the field, I believe, will come out late Friday night, early Saturday morning, and then the coaches will get together Saturday morning at 11 at a site to be determined, and they will get together and as you talked about, do the pairings and seed the team. So you touched on it a little bit, but as far as football goes, what else intrigues you about this whole process that we're going to see unfold here in the next few days?
Well, I think people will still find ways to find fault with the WIAA because they still have a role in this. They have to go and put teams in groups of 8 based on geography, but they've also said, and this is true from past years as well, they're trying to divide up the conference champions as equitably as possible. So they might play with the geography a little bit. Maybe a team, just to throw out, say, Oconomowoc. I mean, they're not probably going to be a conference champion, but they're sort of halfway between Madison Madison and Milwaukee, so they could end up with some Milwaukee schools, they could end up with Madison schools. You're going to see the same thing with a lot of the Classic 8 schools. Arrowhead, Waukesha West, last couple of years they've gone out west, but they could go in a different direction as well. So you're going to have people saying, wow, that group of 8 is really tough, and then looking at a different group and saying there's just not that many great teams in this group. So there's going to still be some frustration that way, but it's going to be tempered so much more than it has been in years past, where you're not going to see the WIA release all the brackets. It's going to have to come from these pods of 8, these coaches, groups of 8 that are getting together.
Right, and I think honestly, I think there'll be some tough choices there, but honestly, I think that it'll almost be, I won't say easy, but it'll make sense. I think,
right.
There are just certain, everyone likes to say, and I've said even here on the show about, the greater metros, maybe the deepest league. But when it comes to good teams, I think there's not as much separation there from one league to another. So, but that's just me talking. I won't be in there voting for me to say it. But that's just my thought, is that, it should be in some cases, cut and dry selections, but except for a few cases here and there. Everyone out there in prep world, you might not know that we are in the presence of, I won't call him a bracketologist, but JR has put a lot of time into the brackets, and you even have your projected field and projected pairings. I guess just tell us real quickly a little bit about how you go about the process, and some of the other factors you look in terms of.
I always call it a very holistic process, because you can't really you can't just look at Division I without knowing who the other teams are that are going to make it in the other 6 divisions, because they come up with a list of 224 teams and then break them down by enrollment into groups of 32. If there's a team that's only got 100 kids in it and they're not playoff eligible, that might open a door for another team with 900 kids in it who is playoff eligible, and that's going to bump some people up and down based on where they fall on the enrollment, sort of flow chart from highest to least enrollment. So you have to really know, if you're going to set up these brackets in advance, how every game in the state's going to play out, which is obviously a huge guessing game. I know the Milwaukee area a little bit, but I don't know a lot about what's happening in the northern part of the state. So
right.
there's some comparison, and you have to look at how teams have done against other teams in the conference. You guess who's going to win, then you come up with your list of 224. This year it looks like every team with a 500 record is going to get in, as well as maybe some teams with a losing record that maybe thought they were eliminated a few weeks ago, but to get to 224, they're going to have to go to some 3rd and 4th tiebreakers to determine who gets in. Teams with like 5 overall wins, even 4 overall wins, and a losing record in conference might get in. Once you have your field, you break them into groups of 32. Then you have to sort of look at the geography, where are the groups of 8, and from there you can try to guess what the seeds might be. There's so much guesswork. It's a little ridiculous, because obviously a team you might think is playoff eligible because you assume they're going to win their last game. They lose, they're out. Well, then
right.
Everything jostles around, because the divisions change, the pods change, everything. So it's a very inexact science, but it is a lot of fun to look ahead and try to guess that out.
Yeah. Now let me ask you one other thing with regard to your brackets.
Mm-hmm.
Every year there are certain teams that kind of
right.
toe the line between Division 1 and 2 or 2 and 3. Give me a couple of schools who are they could go right on the edge, who if they go one way or the other, they could really
right.
affect the bracket.
Sussex Hamilton is a big one. They are Division 1 by my most recent projection. They could easily fall to Division 2. They're the last team in Division 1 right now. They're obviously a very good team. They could easily contend for a state title in either division, so they're going to have their eye on that. Mesmer Shorewood, there was a big hubbub about them last year as they were trying to become playoff eligible for the first time in years. They're also right on that cusp. They've been playing smaller schools, but so I'm sure they'd rather be in Division 2, but they're also right on that, teetering on the edge. And Greendale, as we go further down between Division 2 and Division 3, that's a team that could go one way or the other. It just depends who gets in and how the last week of the season shakes out.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting stuff. Tell us where we can find that online.
Oh, yeah. If you go to livinglakecountry.com, you can find my Preps Alcove blog. I update it every week, and I've got projections from a couple weeks ago. And then after this last batch of games, I got one last projection heading into the playoffs. So the Preps Alcove, livinglakecountry.com.
Okay. Well, that wraps up another edition of Preps Plus Extra. For more Preps Plus action, you can catch me and Lance Allen every Sunday night on today's TMJ4. Take care.